One day, I went to my friend's birthday party. We're gonna call her Jazzy. Well, I'm at the party, and then Jazzy's dad pulls me aside, and he's like, can we talk in private? I was like, yeah, of course, because I thought it was gonna be like a gift for Jazzy.
So long story short, he pulls me aside, and it gets so motherfucking weird. Like
homeboy starts holding my hand, and he's like, I always thought you were one of Jazzy's most beautiful friends. Age is just a number. I don't really like my wife. And I was like, that's disgusting. So I got to the point where I got really uncomfortable. I ran away and I went to go tell Jazzy's mom what her husband was telling me.
So I go tell her, right? This is the best part.
So I go to tell Jazzy's mom and she's like, thank you for telling me. I'm gonna take care of it. Here's this water, drink it. Like, you're probably so overwhelmed right now. So I remember I drank the water and I felt dizzy and tingly. Next thing I know, I'm in the hospital because Jazzy's mom put poison. After I told Jazzy's mom that her husband was trying to get at me, she gives me a cup of water and she's like, drink it. You're probably so stressed out. Long story short, she put poison in the water. I wake up in the hospital with my parents around me, investigators, all of that ish. They're asking me a lot of questions about Jazzy, about the party, what was going on, like what was her dad telling you. Long story short, this whole investigation is going on Jazzy's family and their background, all of that stuff.
This is the best part.
So the investigators, you know, they find out that Jazzy's mom has a background on hurting and poisoning a lot of girls that her husband looks at and talks to. I don't really talk to Jazzy anymore. I don't really know what happened. All I do know is that they took Jazzy's mom to like a psych ward.
When I was in the 3rd grade, we had moved to a new school. BC of what had happened. 2nd grade story. On our first day at school, our teacher gave us reading and math partners. My math partner was this really popular boy who all the girls had a crush on. I was a really shy kid, so I didn't even talk to him that much at all, only for work. One day he asked me why I don't talk to him, and I said I don't know. He asked me if I wanted to be his friend, and I said okay. He was a really outgoing, talkative person, so I did. After we started talking, he started to become really annoying and always pointed out how short I was. This made me really insecure, because I have always been really insecure about my height, but he was saying it in a flirty way. I didn't take it as a compliment, so I would ask him to stop, but he thought I was saying it in a flirty way. And he would always threaten me, saying that if I ignored him he would hug me. This made me disgusted because I was never really boy crazy. This girl noticed that he was giving me attention, so she started to hang out with me during recess. She was very boy crazy and had a crush on this other boy, my reading partner, and wanted me to be their messenger, and she wanted me to tell him the things she wanted to say to him. I did, because she was nice to me, and she would always watch the boys play basketball during recess, yelling at them to fail like that would do something. LMAO. In kindergarten, there was this group of girls obsessed with dolls. In order to be in that group, you needed an ugly shit that stared at you all night. I had no friends and all I wanted was to be in it. When I got home one night, there was an old raggy smelly doll on my bed. Basically, my cousin was cleaning out her room and found her old doll and gave it to me. I didn't care how edo that fucker looked. I was so happy I named her Emma. The next day I packed Emma up and planned to show the girls at recess. At recess I came up to them and asked to be in their group, then showed them my boo Emma. They looked at her and told me no because she looked ugly and poor. Excuse me, Oompa Loompas, my boo Emma wears only the finest designer clothes. No one talks to my baddie Emma like that. So I ripped all their dolls up, took them home, and burned them.
Story time about how I found out my best friend's boyfriend was abusing her. But not only was he abusing her, he had lured her into a cult and was using her for sacrifice. So me and my best friend were living together at the time. She was sitting on the couch taking surveys to make money online. She had made $3K in one day by doing these surveys. Link in my bio if you want to make bank. So she told me about this guy that she had been seeing. I was really happy for her because she had recently just gone through a bad breakup. The longer they were together, she started to get really sick really fast. She was a super healthy girl, like she worked out, she ate right. So the fact that she rapidly started getting sick as soon as she got a new boyfriend kind of worried me. So I tried to talk to her about it, but she got really mad at me. I was trying to tell her to go to the hospital to at least get checked out, but she kept refusing, and as we were arguing, she damn near passed out because how weak and sick she was. I didn't see her for a couple days after that. I thought that she had left the house after we argued. Well, after those few days, I started to notice a really bad smell coming from her room. So I go to check it out. When I open the door, I see her body just laying there. Laying there covered in satanic symbols, the circle with the star in the middle, and there was blood coming out of her mouth. I ran out of time, so left for part 2. Part 2 of how I found out my best friend was getting abused by her boyfriend and how he lured her into a cult to use her for sacrifice. So like I said, I walked into my best friend's room and her body was just laying there. She was covered in satanic symbols and had blood coming out of her mouth. I thought that she had left the house after we argued and went to stay with someone else. I didn't see her coming in and out of the house, and she wasn't texting me. We did get into an argument and I thought she wasn't talking to me because she wanted to cool off. So I immediately called the police. I took her to the hospital and they also looked around her room and around the house. Well, when they looked around her room, they had found chewed up dead rats in her closet. She had found out that it was her eating those dead rats when she had went to the hospital, and they found it in her system. She ended up being in a coma. The police seemed really suspicious of me and was asking me a lot of questions. It does make sense because I was the last person to be seen with her. Well, a few days later, I get a knock on my door. It's the police. They arrested me on suspicion of trying to kill my own best friend. But not because they were suspicious of me, but because my best friend's boyfriend had told the police that my best friend had told him she had overheard a conversation while I was on the phone about me trying to get rid of her for good. Part 3 of how I found out my best friend was getting abused by her boyfriend and he had lured her into a cult to use her for sacrifice. The police had showed up at my house and had arrested me for suspicion of trying to murder my own best friend. Because my best friend's boyfriend had told them that I had a plan to get rid of her for good. So police took me into custody. Apparently my best friend's boyfriend had evidence against me, which was a note that she had written saying that I had a plan to get rid of her, which she had given to her boyfriend, who didn't know what to do with it until now. She had signed that note. They had checked the signature, handwriting, and the way that the letter was written with her parents just to make sure that it was really her. And her parents said, yes, this is 100% her. Mind you, I was completely innocent. Whatever she wrote in this letter was not true. My best friend is not the type to make up lies like that, especially about people who are really close to her. That's when I knew that her boyfriend definitely did something. Well, a miracle happened, child. A miracle happened. My best friend woke up from her coma. She said she was done being brainwashed by her boyfriend and she was ready to tell the police everything about the truth. Part 4, how I found out my best friend's boyfriend was abusing her and lured her into a cult to use her for sacrifice. So while my best friend's boyfriend is trying to tell everybody that I tried to kill my own best friend, she woke up from her coma. She was ready to tell police everything. She said she had met him in the library and they were looking for the exact same book. They started talking, he asked her out on a date, and everything was good from there. He was actually really sweet. He spoiled her, gave her everything that she wanted, and then he started inviting her to these therapy meetings. In these meetings, they would do satanic rituals. They would literally do chants and draw satanic symbols all over their body. And obviously this wasn't her thing, so she told her boyfriend that she didn't want to go to those meetings anymore. Well, that's when he started abusing her and saying things like, I buy you every single thing that you want and this is how you're gonna treat me. She was so blindly in love with him that she kept going to these meetings. And she never told anyone because she was scared of what he would do. Well, she started to get more and more uncomfortable around him and he started to notice that. And in one of these meetings, they said that they would need a volunteer to eat dead rats for a sacrifice. Her boyfriend offered for her to do it. For Part 5 of how I found out my best friend's boyfriend was abusing her and tried to lure her into a cult to use her for sacrifice. So like I said, her boyfriend was taking her to these meetings. It was a cult. And in one of the meetings, they needed somebody to eat dead rats for a sacrifice. And her boyfriend basically offered up his girlfriend, my best friend. What the sacrifice was for, I have no idea. Anyway, so yeah, she's eating the dead rats and shit. And basically eating all these dead rats was supposed to like kill her. And he basically told her if he didn't eat the dead rats, then he would get his guys from the meeting to do something to her. Well, eventually the day of the sacrifice came. So one day he forced her to write the note. He was the one who forced her to write it. She didn't write it herself willingly. To basically say that it was me who put her in a coma and it was actually him, so he didn't get in trouble. They arrested him and he went to jail. This story time was sent to me by a follower and it actually involves a very popular creator on this app. They actually have millions of followers. Let's get into it. So this girl first started talking to this creator when she DM'd him and he actually replied. She thought he was really cute. He thought she was really cute and they exchanged numbers. Ended up meeting up at Playlist and he invited her to chill in his Airbnb. Well, things got a little bit freaky deaky in that Airbnb. You know, they was fucking. Afterwards, they just kind of chilled. They were laid up talking about life, you know, all that deep shit. And eventually he told her that she had to leave because his boys were coming through or whatever. They just wanted to chill and talk about boy stuff. But before she left, he told her that he loved her and he wanted to be with her. What the fuck is going on here? Let me fix that real quick. Okay, we back. So she left and went to tell her friends what just happened. Hours had passed and she noticed that he wasn't really posting on his story anymore. And he usually posts a lot. Well, her friend opened Snapchat, noticed that he actually did post. He posted hours ago, and he was with another girl. Part two of the TikToker story time. I forgot to mention that this TikToker actually took her virginity. Her first time was in the Airbnb. So yeah, she noticed that he blocked her from watching his story because her friend could see his story, but she couldn't. And clearly he did not want her to see that he's laid up with another girl in that same Airbnb that they were just fucking. Anyway, so she obviously texted him, was like, what the fuck is this? She threatened to expose him and everything. And he replied saying, well, if you expose me, I'm gonna expose you. She said, what do you have against me? And he replied with, I know you have a boyfriend. And she did have a boyfriend. So she said, oop. And he proceeded to tell her that he only wanted to use her for pussy while he was at Playlist.
This is how a fortune teller saved my life. One night after work, my friend Abby and I decided to go out and grab a drink. On the way, Abby noticed a little hole-in-the-wall business that had a sign out front that said psychic readings. Abby's always doing spontaneous and super random things, so of course she pulled over as soon as she saw it and insisted that we go in. I was apprehensive at first, but she talked me into it. I never believed in this sort of thing, but I figured I'd go in to make Abby happy. As we walked in, we were greeted by a very old woman that reeked of cheap perfume. She brought us to the back room where I noticed 3 or 4 cats lounging about. She read Abby's palm first and told her a super generic fortune that sounded like she got it off of Google Daily Horoscopes. I couldn't help but to scoff. When it was my turn, she grabbed my hand and began reading my palm. She seemed to be taking forever with my reading. Then she looked up at me with a worried look, gripped my hand so hard that it hurt, and said, you will receive something that doesn't belong to you in the coming months. It will be wet. Stay at a friend or family member's house that day, dear. I gave her a strange look and we left and went on with our night. Little did I know this piece of information would end up saving my life.
Story time about the psycho neighbor that stalked me. So, when I graduated college, I moved into a new apartment. When I first got there, I was moving my things in and my neighbor introduced himself and helped me move a couple of things upstairs. After we had got done, he asked for my number, but I told him I wasn't really looking for a relationship. But he said, let's just swap numbers just in case, a fire happens. So I gave him my number and I really didn't think nothing of it. Maybe a week later, he starts knocking on my door and giving me gifts just about every day, like teddy bears and flowers. Then maybe about 2 weeks later, I told him to stop because I wasn't really interested in him. So the next day, I wake up to make coffee and take out trash. When I pass my living room, the teddy bear gift that my neighbor gave me makes a click noise. When I quickly rip the teddy bear open, it's a camera inside. Like for part 2 about the psycho neighbor that stalked me. So, like I said earlier, the teddy bear gift that my neighbor had gave me makes a clicking noise. When I quickly rip the teddy bear open, it's a camera inside. And I go into a panic mode. Out of nowhere, there's a knock on my door, and it's my neighbor. He says, good morning, it's me again. You left your trash too close to the curb, so I moved it for you. I realized that my door was still open, so I try to run over and lock the door, but he just opens it. I yell at him, telling him to get out. He closes the door behind him and says, that's no way to talk to a neighbor. I start backing up. He looks over and sees that I ripped the teddy bear apart. I didn't know what else to do, so I just ran to my room. And he chases after me and pulls my hair. Like for part 3. Part 3 about the psycho neighbor that stalked me. So he comes in, I run into my room, and he chases after me. Before I could get up, he pulls onto my hair and starts dragging me towards the kitchen. I saw the coffee that I had made earlier, and I was able to pick it up and throw the hot coffee in his face. He starts screaming loud, and I took that chance to run into my room and lock the door. I immediately start calling the police, and from there, it sounded like he ran out of my apartment. When the cops came, they're doing an investigation, and all the gifts that he gave me all had cameras in them. And when I told them about my neighbor,
Part 2 of how my stalker defended me in a fight at a hot dog shop. Every time I saw him, he seemed to be more intoxicated than the last. He'd walk in and say, hey beautiful, or hey pretty girl, so casually as though it was really my name. One night I finished my shift at 2 a.m. and I saw him on the other side of the sidewalk, watching me and waving. I tried not to think about how long he might have been there. My manager walked me to my car that night. Then one Saturday around 3 a.m. the shop was booming. There was a 40-minute wait for french fries. The tiny shop floor was crowded with people who had rolled out of any one of the nearby nightclubs drunk and starving. A big, bulky man in his mid to late 20s started getting in my face. He had been waiting 30 minutes for the fries he ordered. I kept apologizing, but that just made him angrier. I was desperately trying to plan an escape from my position against the back wall behind the counter to the front door where I could get a bouncer's attention. There was no hope. The store was too crowded. That's That's when I hear a sloppy but familiar voice saying, "Leave her alone," and my stalker emerges from the crowd. He was only 5'5", but he fronts up against the massive man and they start fighting. Luckily, the commotion caught a bouncer's eye who ran in and swiftly de-escalated the situation. After that, I got a job somewhere else and moved on.
This is another road rage story. I really don't know what to call it, so I'm just gonna get into it. So I was on the main highway in my area, and I had went into a jug handle to go on the opposite side of the highway. I think only New Jersey has jug handles. I'm probably wrong, but comment down below and let me know. But basically, it's you make a giant circle and then you get to a stoplight and then it tells you can go left onto the opposite side of the highway. So there was a car in front of me and they had an Ohio license plate and there weren't really any cars around us because it was really late at night. The light had turned green and they weren't going. I'm not talking 3 seconds, I'm talking 10 seconds. So I honked my horn just to be okay, go. And they were not happy with that. So they start inching forward, brake checking me every second until we're in the middle of the intersection. And the only other car on the road was this big bus waiting for the light to turn green so that they can go straight. He was doing this to me until the light had turned green. The bus driver even honked at him. When we finally got on the main road, the bus driver drove in between us, forcing the guy to swerve into an exit.
Story time on how my wig came off in front of my date. The guy I was meeting up with on the date was one of my friend's co-workers. She actually set us up because she thought that he would be my type. Fast forward, we go to Fridays and we're having a great time. And he seems like a nice all-around type of guy. Now, that day, my wig was slayed, and I believe the hair was 30 inches. When the waitress comes over, she gives me and my date our plate of food. Before she leaves, she asks us if there anything else we needed. We said no. Then she put a pen that she had in her hand in her back pocket, and like I said before, my hair was really long, and she ended up sweeping a few of my hairs in her pocket. When the waitress walks away, my wig pops off, and me and my date are in shock. He stares at me for a good 10 seconds, and I tell him I needed to go to the bathroom, and I also got my wig back. But when I come back out to apologize and continue our date, he disappears. Oh yeah, and I also ended up paying for the whole date. This is why you should never eat peanut butter. So my cousin just had her baby girl, and she was just getting around and learning to be a new mommy. But she was really messy when it came to changing diapers. When Father's Day came, she threw the party and invited all the family and their kids. When everyone gets there, everyone is having a good time, and she pulls out bread and starts making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for all the kids. In the middle of her preparing, her daughter starts crying, and it's because she needed her diaper changed. So she went into the bathroom to change her diaper, and after she got done, she handed her to me and starts to wash her hands. Afterwards, she just went right back to making the sandwiches. Once she got done, she handed all the kids a sandwich, and I noticed that she had peanut butter on her arm, and I told her to wash it off. And she was like, no biggie, and licked it off her arm. And she realized really quickly that it wasn't peanut butter. Story time on how I got caught stealing tampons. Yes, I know tampons. Anyways, this was when I was in 6th grade, and at the time, I didn't even start my period. But my best friend Katrina did. She'd get really cute pads and tampons, the one with butterflies and flowers. And I was so jealous because I wanted to keep those cute packets in my purse and take them into the bathroom. So one day after school, I go into a pharmacy and I see the exact same tampons that my friend Katrina had, but they were $24 and I didn't have that. So I stuffed a box of tampons in my book bag and I tried to walk out. But before I get close to the door, an employee stops me and takes me into a room. And guys, when she found out what I stole, I didn't even get in trouble. She actually bought them for me.
This girl was catfishing people with my pictures, and her own sister was the one that actually told me about this. She had a Facebook of me with a lot of pictures for 3 years. I tried to report it, but they didn't remove the page. Later on, I get a DM from this guy. He told me that he fell in love with the catfish, and he was just venting to me. He said that they would always text and call each other. He even said that she would talk on the phone with his mom. He told me that she had an Instagram and a Snapchat acting like it was me. And I asked him, I know this is very personal, but did she ever send you anything inappropriate or nudes through Snapchat or through these apps? Tell me why. He says yes. He went back on his Snapchat and he was able to find those pictures. Her face was not showing, but her body was. And it's crazy because her body shape was exactly like mine. I was so creeped out. My catfish wouldn't only send pictures of my selfies, but she would also send pictures of nudes. Thankfully, it wasn't actually me. That would be very creepy. But this girl would send pictures of someone that looked like me with the same body shape as me. As far as I know, she would send these pictures through Snapchat. And tell me why I searched up the username and this Bitmoji literally looked like me. Like the emoji that we could create, it looked like me. Like, how is this possible? And the guy that fell in love with her actually sent me a picture of how she looks like. And let me tell you, that girl does not look like me at all. I had contacted the fake page and I told her to stop or else I would expose her pictures. And she didn't care. She still did it. So I exposed her on my personal page and I showed everybody how she looked like.
This is why you should always listen to your gut. When I was 13, my family and I were headed home from night church service. It was my mom, me, and my 2 siblings. The road we were driving on was in the country and it was late at night, so there were no lights and no one else on the road. As we were coming up on our turn, a car suddenly comes swerving from our turning spot. They were turning so fast that they came into our lane and almost crashed into us. My mom quickly swerved as they tried to get back into their lane. Unfortunately, they overcorrected and flipped their car, landing on the driver's side door in a ditch. My mom hit her brakes and jumps out the car to go help the other driver. She gets about 3 steps away from our car, but then stops dead in her tracks. My siblings and I were watching her from the back window and wondering why she wasn't going to help the person. That's when he starts yelling for help and my mom starts to move to help him, but for some reason she stops again in the center of the road. Another car flies behind us and the guy doesn't hesitate to jump out and go help. The man pries open the passenger door so the guy trapped inside can get out. As the man crawls out, he instantly gets into a frog-like crouching position on top of the car. He has this insane look on his face and launches himself off of the car, hitting the guy who helped him. Then he turns his gaze in our direction and starts sprinting towards us. Part 2 of why you should always trust your gut. As he's sprinting towards our car, my mom is sprinting towards us as well. He must have known he wouldn't get there before her because he changed directions and went to the other car. My mom jumps in and locks the doors as the man hijacks the car behind ours, almost hitting us as he takes off. The guy who was just carjacked runs to my mom's window and is screaming at her to call 911 because his phone and his girlfriend were in the car that just took off. I quickly dialed it on my phone and handed it to her. As she's talking to the operator, we hear a woman scream down the road. The man takes off running and returns a few minutes later with a severely scraped up woman in his arms. The girlfriend told us that the man noticed her in the car and was trying to hit her and finally pushed her out going 60 miles per hour. When the police arrived, they informed my mom that the man had shot and killed someone behind an apartment complex and was trying to get away. Later that night after we got home, I talked to my mom and asked her why she stopped running to the car earlier. She said she had such a strong feeling that she should stay in the car with us that it was almost like she could hear it. When she heard him yell and started to go over to help, the same feeling overtook her. Luckily, that man was caught later that night trying to steal a new car. But to this day, I wonder what would have happened if my mom hadn't listened to her gut feeling. This is how I met my soulmate without ever actually speaking to him. I work at a small family-owned ice cream shop. This really cute guy would come in every Friday around 5. I never actually took his order as I was the one making the cones and sundaes behind the counter. He would always tell my coworker taking the orders, "I want whatever she's in the mood to make. Tell her to surprise me." And he would point me out. My coworker would deliver the message and he would look at me and smile. Each Friday when he came in, he would say, "I'll have my regular order, whatever she wants to make." I made him something different every week. I try to be creative and give him something new and fun every time. I would try really hard not to look over at his booth, but I would always catch myself staring. He started leaving me little flirty messages on his receipt with a small cash tip at his table. I started to write back on his orders with caramel or chocolate sauce on his plate the best I could. However, it wasn't very legible or practical, so I started giving him flirty little sticky notes with his order. It made my Fridays really fun and something to look forward to. I was waiting for him to ask me for my number or to ask me out on a date so we could actually talk to each other. This went on for weeks until he finally made the cutest move ever. Part 2, how I met my soulmate without ever actually speaking to him. After a few weeks of writing to each other on receipts, he finally decided to shoot his shot. He came in at his usual time, and I immediately started making him something new that I had in my head all day. Sweet cream ice cream with Oreos and little heart-shaped candies that I brought from home just for this. As always, he left me his note on the receipt with a tip, but it was special this time. It said, "It's my turn to make you something. Meet me at Jasmine's Fine Kitchen tomorrow at 9 p.m. The restaurant he was referring to was in the same parking lot where I work. I went home and spent about 2 hours trying to figure out what I was going to wear for my date. I showed up the next night to the restaurant, ready to finally talk to this guy. I walked in and I saw him waiting for me at a really nice table in the back of the room. The first thing he said to me was, "What can I get you tonight, miss?" with a huge smile on his face. It turns out he works as a cook at the restaurant. I of course told him to surprise me, just like he would always request from me. He went to the back and immediately came out with a 3-course meal that he had already prepared for us. We had the most amazing date and the rest is history. He still comes in every Friday to get his surprise ice cream order for me. Story time about how my stalker defended me in a fight at a hot dog shop. A few years ago, when I was 19, I got a job at a hot dog shop. It had a phallic pun for a name in a somewhat shady area, and the shop was pretty well known and had some fantastically dark local lore. Rumors that the hot dogs were made out of horse meat, or that we had been closed down by the health inspector and reopened illegally circulated. None of it was true, but people kept coming back for our delicious hot dogs. The community was diverse and sometimes dangerous, but people looked out for each other. One shift, early in the morning, I was working the register when a man comes in. He had long dark hair and thick stubble covering most of the lower half of his face. The shop was busy, he ordered and stepped aside but kept chatting with me. I was used to this. In an area with a lot of nightlife, I got comfortable with drunk ramblings and people hitting on me. I felt safe as long as I was on the other side of the counter. He was talking about how all the other men in the shop were posers and how beautiful I was. He also told me that he's a chef at a nearby restaurant, but I gave him a fake name just to be safe. I started seeing him often. It wasn't uncommon to have regulars, some even on a first name basis, but when my coworkers told me he had come in looking for me, asking for me when I wasn't there, I started to feel uneasy.
Story of the time that me and my friends jumped off a bridge. And no, I do not advise you to jump off a bridge, so don't do that. This is something that I did when I was 14 and stupid. So I had this one friend, and he was always that kid who was doing front flips and back flips and just like always being so active and crazy. So me, him, and a group of our friends all went to the beach one day. And he was telling us about this bridge that he would always come to in the summer to like jump off of it into the water. And none of us were planning on jumping off this bridge except for the kid. So we get to the bridge, and it's not like too high up, but like it's still like scary. Like if you were to like be leaning over the edge of it, you'd be scared. I mean, at least for me. So the second that we get to the bridge, he decides to jump off of it and do a front flip. And one of my girlfriends who was there as well jumped off the bridge too. And then another person, then another person, then everybody except for me jumped off the bridge. Until they somehow convinced me to want to. By the way, this didn't end pretty. Like for part 2. Story of the time me and my friends jumped off a bridge. Part 2. So they eventually convinced me to jump off this bridge. So I stood up on this railing type thing. It was like a ledge, and I jump into the water. And it wasn't like 1, 2, 3, like easy, just jump in. I was literally like so scared. Not gonna lie, it kind of felt good while I was doing it. I was like, dang, I'm not gonna do it again, but that was cool. And mind you, like, I didn't even think about it at the time, but we were literally trespassing. You're not supposed to jump off a bridge. Then once I'm in the water, I'm like, wait a minute, how am I gonna get out? Because like I said, my friend who would always like do these crazy stunts, he was very like active. Like he was able to like climb a tree, no problem. Do a backflip on a thin wire, no problem. He was just really good with like things like that. So at that point, he already jumped off the bridge and climbed back up like 5 times. And he made it look really easy. So then I start climbing up this wall where there's literally coral, scratching up my toes and my hands. And he was at the top trying to like pull me up and help me. And once I got to the top, I was literally gushing blood.